I wanted to bring you on today because online particularly, definitely in the streaming space, all of the perspectives I'm getting from about the election, almost all of them are white. And that's just the blunt thing, just to be blunt about what this conversation is. And so there's not a lot of big black political streamers. There's a few and they're great, but definitely not people with political experience. And so what I wanted to do, because I'm hearing a lot of concern from people in my community and others about how the black vote is going to affect this election, how motivated black voters are, if they're going to come out for Biden, because people are just seeing polling numbers and people are starting to panic and they don't know what's going on. If, oh my goodness, are we going to see a black wave for Trump? Is this like some big Republican revolution with the black vote? And so before we get into any of that though, I wanted to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself for the people who might not know who you are.
Awesome. Cool. Am I on?
Yes.
Are we live?
We're on right now. Yes, we're live.
That's fantastic. That cracks me up because I'm like, oh, this is a great dry run. No, I'm Joe Paul, and I am the executive director of Black Men Vote. I also have an AI startup called Optima Nova AI Strategies and Solutions. So switching hats back to Black Men Vote, we're an organization that was founded in 2012. Our primary focus is to ensure that Black men are engaging in the civic process, the right, registering to vote and committing to vote. We have a special program called the Shop Talk Initiative, and our Shop Talk Initiative is our barbershop initiative. And you've probably heard of tons of barbershop initiative people go to barber, but ours is different because we leverage these barbershops as field offices, and we provide direct training to the barbers so they can serve as field organizers. So that way they can have meaningful conversations with their clients who they've already built community trust with. And all they're doing now is adding, hey, have you registered to vote? And if so, can you commit to vote? Can we get your information so we can communicate with you, et cetera? We also have Black Men Engage, which is a health and mental wellness focus, basically the whole being. We also have Rising Changemakers, which is for youth and young adults, where we're introducing them to policy and policy making and civic engagement early. So yeah, that's a little bit about us and what we do.
Fantastic. I wanted to talk to you because when we've had a conversation about this before, it was a little kind of a media get together, a media scrum, I guess you could call it. And it fascinates me that this isn't something that was being done before. Is this something that was being done before and now it's just being upscaled? Is this something that political parties have experimented before, specifically using barbershops as a way to communicate with the Black community?
Yeah, so yes, barbershops and churches. So barbershops are more recent, salons, barbershops and beauty shops are more recent. Churches used to be the go-to, right? And so, but barbershops more recent. The strategy with barbershops is basically going where you think Black people or Black men in particular will be, right? And so we'll likely be at a barbershop, that's for sure, right? And so we'll likely be at a sporting event, we'll likely be at certain different places, we'll likely be anywhere, right? But primarily at these barbershops who primarily serve clients who look like me. So our strategy, the difference between what we do in leveraging that barbershop or that beauty salon as a means of communicating and connecting with community, we have now evangelize them, and they now serve as ambassadors to make sure that they have meaningful conversations with their community members about why it's important to vote. One of the things that we also have done that's different is making politics local, right? So for a while, it's been every 4 years, the president's running, et cetera, when they don't understand that their voter registration card is inextricably tied to their economic development, right? It can mean the difference between whether you have a speed bump or a garbage can at the end of your street, or if a bus rolls through your route or not, right? And so when you make it make sense and bring it down to those terms where, yeah, not in my backyard, but yes, it actually is in your backyard, that's a palatable message. So that's the difference between what we're doing. We've also incorporated a health component where we engage with med students to provide free health screenings at these barbershops. So it's that's the difference. And we also provide micro grants to these barbers and barbershops. So it's not like, so has it been done before? No, not like this. It's been leveraged, it's been used as a tool, communication tool to meet this audience where they are. But the way we're leveraging it is more meaningful, and it's not based on cycles. It's not a transaction type of relationship. We're trying to create transformational relationships through this program.
I want to make sure that you have time to talk about this program. So I got 2 more questions before we move on to the big topic that my audience wants. Number one, how do you integrate this casually? Because it can't just be like, oh, nice hair now. So Joe Biden, am I right? Like how is this integrated casually so it doesn't feel like it's being forced on these people? Because if somebody goes to the barber shop, most of them probably didn't think they were going there to debate politics or talk politics. And is there been anything that you guys have learned from doing this that you think other people should know about?
Interestingly enough, they actually do talk politics in barbershops, right? And so it doesn't dominate the conversation. If we're going on a scale from 1 to 100, probably 10 to 15% of the time, most of the time, probably 50% of the conversation is about sports and who's the greatest of all time, right? And so in the other conversations that happen, but it doesn't dominate the conversation. What we do is we empower these gentlemen to actually ask the right questions, right? Hey, are you registered to vote? Right? Hey, we ask those questions. Are you, hey, what would you like to see differently around here? Like what, et cetera. Well, what's important to you? Getting them engaged in that conversation. More importantly, when they come in, there's signage all over, right? We say, there's signage that has sign this QR code or scan this QR code to register to vote, or scan this QR code to commit to vote, or get out there and vote, register to vote, et cetera. So there's signage in there. So it's suggestive marketing, but it's in your face. And so the barbers, as they communicate with their clients, they're then able to say, hey, you see that QR code? Why don't you scan it really quickly before we get started so we can, put your information in and we'll be able to communicate with you about, why it's important to vote. And then they switch the topic. So it's not as hard as it sounds.
Has there been any, because I would imagine that there's a lot of data that somebody could get from this that could be useful to anybody that's trying to communicate or get into contact with the community, know that their issues are being heard. What type of responses have you gotten that might have surprised you going into this?
Man, that's a great question. So our principal goal as an organization is to collect and harvest data. All right. So let's be clear, because the data is king, right? Whoever owns the data is king. And so for us, we want to, right? We want to monopolize, if you will, or at least own the data on Black men, right? The Black male electorate, number one, because we feel, and we're a non-biased, nonpartisan organization. We don't care whether you vote left or right or up or down. What we care about is you actually going and exercising your right to vote. We care about that. We care about you being knowledgeable about the issues. We care about you understanding the policies that impact you. But yeah, our goal is to collect information. And so they know that when we go in and when we collect this information, we're now able to put them into different categories, from volunteer, potential donor, poll worker, you name it, right? You name it. And so we're able to communicate with them. But yeah, our goal, Dylan, is to get as much information as possible and to protect that information, right? And so be very, very mindful of what we do and not sell that information, because we lose credibility the more people who have access to that information, because especially if they knew it came through us. So, they'll know how it got out.
Nobody wants to get a million emails and then find out, it was Joe that did this.
Exactly right. And I will deny it, forever.
So I wanted to talk, since we're just talking about how numbers are king, data is king, let's talk about some numbers. There has been some polling data that has really alarmed some Democratic insiders inside the party, and others as well, pointing to possibly 20 to 25%, some even going a little further, of the Black vote going towards Donald Trump going into 2024. Now, some people are saying that this is the start of a new, Trumpian revolution in the Black community, that a lot of Black conservative influencers are trying to go with that right now. Others are saying that, this is just a few polls, or you can't look at the data this early, or any number of other reasons as to why this data is flawed, maybe the sample method. Have you seen this data, and what's your take on it?
Yeah, so, here's how I feel about polls in general. Okay, so this probably has nothing to do with the organizations I represent, but more of the cynic Joe Paul, right? I have never been asked a lot of these questions, right? And so it's hard for me to take some of this information seriously. And a lot of the information that they have is based on such a small sample that you can't. They take this little number and amplify and say, oh, 25. No. So here's the truth. in these barbershops, they're not talking about Trump or Biden, right? We're talking more about, and the black male electorate is becoming more and more sophisticated. It's not more about just going out and voting, right? Black male electorate has seen exactly the benefits of being engaged through Black women, right? The last 3-4 years, you got a Supreme Court justice out of the deal. You got a vice presidency out of the deal. You got the most Black female federal appointees in the history combined for all the guys. Are you kidding me? That's good lobbying, right? And so we feel like we have a strong lobby as well as a Black male electorate. And the goal is now, what are you willing to do for this vote? So there's less allegiance to party and more allegiance to which candidate represents our best interests. And so that's one of the things that we've seen out there. We don't. You're not hearing a lot of, we're going to vote for Trump. If anything, it's all just talk, right? It's all just talk because, hey, men lie, women lie, Dylan, but numbers don't, right? So when you look at who's coming out there and who's actually voting versus who's talking, it's a stark difference. And so anybody can say whatever, and everybody can fill in a poll. But when you see in November, Black folks aren't just running to Trump. There's no benefit there. I mean, you have access to information. You can think critically. Or you can do, or Google's your friend, ChatGPT is your friend. Literally do the research and find out who's better for you. So I don't believe that there's any truth to that. It's just really a talking point to scare folks and to also misinform in order to motivate or encourage, right? And so it's like, oh yeah, well I guess 25%. Well, maybe I should go check out what they are interested in, right? So anyhow. Hopefully that answers your question with all these.
There certainly is a phenomenon, people should be aware of it, of people kind of trying to manifest numbers into reality. I think that happens a lot during primary campaigns. If you get like the tiniest little bump in RCP, you like super highlight it, say, hey, look, these people think I'm good, let me join in. And I think from the influencer perspective, that's what a lot of the hype is. But I mean, I don't know for sure, of course. I can't read anybody's mind. Do you think that the representation of having Kamala Harris and Supreme Court Justice, Miss Jackson, want to make sure I remember the name, chat, don't destroy me, or any of the other picks that have been pointed towards as good representation is something that's going to get voters out? Or do you think they see that as like real representation that matters in their everyday life, or is it hollow? How do you think how do you think the community is broadly viewing this, at least the people that you're interacting with?
Here's the problem. The problem is the messaging. And there are a lot of good things, in fact, that the Biden administration has done to support the African-American community, right? And so, but they don't do a good job of telling that story. And so and who's going to take up the mantle, right? I mean, and to say, hey, wait a minute, here's how great it, no. So they don't do a good job of telling that story. That's the difference between, making it believable and not. I mean, they just don't don't do a good job of telling that story. The Biden administration have done some fantastic things, but on the other side, Trump does a fantastic job of telling lies and making it believable. And if you say it enough times, people are just well, maybe it's true, right? So yeah, I mean,
I think we're having a connection problem at the moment. Uh-oh. Give it a second, it'll probably load.
Uh-oh. Can you hear me?
Nah, well, I can hear you, but it's kind of chopped up. Just give it a moment, it could load. It won't.
See.
Seems I see.
Testing. Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you for a second, but then you cut out again. 1 second. I think it just needs a second to connect. I'm looking at the bars, and I think it might be on your side. Could you leave and then try to rejoin if possible?
Let's see. It's a little bit. Yeah, let me do that and see if we can reset the things. Sorry, not.
Okay. Then there was one. I shall speak for the black community. It shall be me. No, no. Hey, there you go. Now it looks good.
It looks good?
Yep.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right, fantastic.
Do you want to pick up where you left off, or do you want another question? I can throw another ball at you.
Throw another ball. Throw another ball.
Throw another ball at you. So, what are the policy deliverables that you think the Biden campaign is not talking enough about?
Yeah. You know, I tell you, the support that they've done for HBCUs, Biden has given more funds to HBCUs than any of the previous presidents. I think
What's
that's
interesting about that is Trump talked about it all the time, the HBCU funding. I haven't heard the Biden administration talk about it maybe once or twice.
Again, messaging, right? And so they don't do a good job at storytelling. Trump does a good job at lying, which turns into storytelling, right? And so, right, which transforms into some form of storytelling. But they don't do a good job of storytelling. That's one of the reasons why you don't see, Biden, even with the student loans. I mean, the student loan forgiveness. I mean, that's been wildly impactful. I haven't benefited from it yet. I don't know if you have student loans or not, Dylan, but I haven't benefited from it yet.
I can thank Senator Van Hollen for that. He helped me a lot with some issues I had with my college. Got to give him a shout out.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you didn't even have student loans?
No, I didn't have student loans. It was a long fight with I had one term at UMD, and then I dropped out to go to Ukraine to document the war, and they wanted to charge me $27,000. And because they had me registered as an out-of-state student for some reason. I have no clue.
That's insane. That's insane. That's crazy. But some of the other things I can just point to that we've been able to benefit from is the rescue plan that supports small business. Now there's juxtaposition. You have an attack on a lot of these support systems that's put in place to support minority business owners, et cetera, under the guise of D&I, et cetera. But that's probably another conversation for another day, Dylan. So we'll stick with this. We'll stick with this topic right here. CJR, criminal justice reform. I laugh because, I mean, how did we get here, right? Versus now, how are we getting out of here? So we can talk about that as well. How Biden supported a lot of how we got here. And so he absolutely has to fix how we move forward, right? And so,
I mean, I hear Republicans sometimes talk about the crime bill as an attack on Joe Biden and his history. I mean, he's just been a senator for so long, and he's been involved in the criminal justice conversation for so long. And during the crime spike, as everybody was panicking to try to find solutions to the spike in crime, and he was a very loud voice at that time. And there's a cavalcade of clips that will get trotted out anytime this issue comes up. And I mean, there have been some things that the Biden administration has moved on, but there hasn't been any big victories, either due to the big victories that people would usually trounce around to try to be like, look, I've paid my toll for my history on this issue. Now people can say that's due to the legislative situation, Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, anybody can point at any reason that is, but I don't think many people think about that legislative reality. They just think there's a president, there hasn't been as much action as I want done on this, and we have all these old clips. It's an area where Biden, I think, might be his weakest going into 2024 for progressives or motivating people to come out.
Agreed. They don't. That's why he's going to have to rely heavily on surrogates, right? Folks who can actually tell a good story and go around and carry that torch for him and hold that little green Bible and go door to door. He's going to need that. Biden doesn't know how to tell a good story. And I agree. For a multitude of reasons why certain things don't get done up the street at 1600 Penn and down the block in the U.S. Capitol building. But one thing that's important to note is I believe that our democracy is at stake, right? And so in November. And so when you look at just simple apples to apples, are we going to be the same United States 4 years from now? Depending on who, if Trump's elected, no, we are not. And that's a fact. And so, are we going to be the same or improving? Yeah, I believe we will under Biden, right? And so, and that has a lot to do with what we've seen already. Look at our economy. It's still pretty good. Look at our unemployment rate. We're doing pretty good. Now, that is painting a broader brush. It's zooming out into 10,000-foot view and saying, okay, well, this is what he's doing for the country. How are African Americans benefiting from this, right? What are the African American numbers in comparison to the rest of the country? But again, Biden's going to have to rely heavily on surrogates to tell a good story.
How do you explain? Sorry, there was some reverb. How do you explain the beneficial macroeconomic factors? I mean, we are compared to other G7 countries, we're blazing in comparison. How do you explain those positive macroeconomic factors and compare that to people's personal economic struggles or reality that they're still dealing with, whether it due to the cancelization of the child tax cut or any other number of issues?
You know, that's a question of the day, because, you know, I don't know about you. You see what the cost of goods are, right? And that's the tough part. Now, the positive part of it, you show left and right? So getting my thoughts together, you show left and right. You show the positive factors where GDP growth is doing pretty well. You have a low unemployment rate. Inflation is out of control, but the stock market is doing well, right? And then when you compare that to folks' reality of income inequality, quality of employment is a little rough, even though we have great unemployment, but with the advent and introduction and rampant growth of artificial intelligence, which will supplant millions of low-wage, low-paying jobs, you know, we're going to be in pretty bad shape here in short order if we don't do something. Cost of living increases, et cetera. So now we look at comparing the macroeconomic factors to the realities of individuals. Now, who benefits? The economic growth might be robust, but you know, if the gains are primarily seen with high income earners, then average workers obviously won't feel that type of impact. Now, we saw recently that Biden said he wanted to put a 46% capital gains tax, you know, which I support, probably because I'm not a multi-billionaire. But you know, I'd probably be against it if I had a whole bunch of money. But I support it because I think folks need to pay their fair share. You know, so. But yeah.
Wait, but have you considered the counter argument though that would be very mean?
What would be very mean? Which one?
Taxing the rich. That would be very uncouth.
Who, from whose perspective? I mean, so you know, there was an America long ago where there was income equality, right? Folks were paid a fair wage. Like you know, if you work 30, 40 hours a week and go home, you'd be food on the table. You knew that you had a house that you can pay for your, you know, you can take care of your basic needs. Now that's not the case, right? And so, you know, you get folks CEOs who are getting paid 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 times their average worker. That's unequal. That's unequal, right? That's inequality at its best. And so taxing the rich may not be a bad thing, right? And so I don't know if 44% is the right answer, but I know where we currently are is not, right? And so there are too many loopholes for folks who don't need it, right? And the funny thing is the overwhelming majority of billionaires and millionaires want to pay more, right? They're like, I mean, look, I take advantage of these because I can. The laws are in my favor, so I can. And you cannot be against that, right? And so, and once I become a multi-gazillionaire, I will do the same thing. I'll take advantage of whatever the laws can support and help me keep most of my money, right? But yeah, you can't really blame them. But I tell you, everyone needs to pay their fair share for the good of the order. And so we're responsible for each other. We are our brother's keeper, our sister's keeper. So yeah, I mean, and the other thing too is not a zero-sum game, Dylan. Just because I'm paying more doesn't mean that, you know, I'm getting less, right? Folks, there's a study done recently that, you know, the average person in the world can survive off, you know, 70, 80 grand a year and be extremely happy. I think with inflation, it's probably like 150, 200,000. But either way, right? Once you get to the hundreds of millions and the billions, I mean, does your quality of life really change? Right after that, it's more creating penis-shaped rockets to try to get to the moon, right? So, you know, so it's insane, right? So yeah, those are my thoughts.
A penis-shaped rocket would make me very happy, though, if I had one, I would admit.
Well, you and me both.
But I wanted to move on to the conversation of Democratic Party strategy going into 2024. The DNC War Chest is doing pretty good right now, and the Biden campaign War Chest is doing pretty good. Definitely, if you compare it relative to the RNC War Chest, which has been having problems. I think they've cut 33% of the staff at the RNC. They had a big, like, almost like a coup with the Trump family at the RNC right now. They're cutting program after program, including the community outreach initiative into both Latino and Black communities. And I was wondering if the Democratic Party, having a much bigger war chest, was going to be investing any more than average into these communities, definitely with some people concerned about how these communities, what's going to be the turnout numbers for these communities and how they're going to vote this election, considering the polling data, even if it's faulty, as many people consider, as you consider. It's still, do you think it's spooking anyone into possibly investing any of that war chest money into the areas it needs to be invested into?
It is, in fact, right? So here's the interesting thing. There's always a piece of the pie that goes towards Black and Latinx and, you know, minority communities in order to move the votes, women, and so on and so forth. There's always a piece of the pie.
Can I ask you a blunt question?
Of course.
Latinx, is this something that is asked to be, like, do people ask you to call them Latinx?
Interestingly enough, I go back and forth between Latinx or Hispanic or, you know, nowadays, I don't know, right? Who knows? But I know that that's the accepted term, right? When, you know, when we've used it internally and externally. So Latinx, but yeah, you know, I've anecdotally spoken to some of Latinx people who have no problem with the term, you know, because it, yeah, but yeah.
Okay.
Good
I was just interested because there's so much noise about the term, so I was just interested in asking you since you used it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, you hear both sides, right? I mean, earlier on, a couple of years ago when it was, like 3-4 years ago when it was first brought into the lexicon, people didn't really have too many issues with it because it was kind of like, well, you know, it's like, it's not Latino, Latina, as I was saying, it's all Latinx, right? We're all, but then folks are like, well, that's not my identity, and, you know, so I don't know, Dylan. I don't know.
So let's pick up where we left off, and I'll just ask you a few more questions, and I'll let you go, because originally it was only supposed to be 30 minutes, but it just kept going because I'm very interested.
All good.
So
time flies when you're having fun.
This war chest, is it going to be dedicated into filling the hole that Republicans are leaving by pulling back their resources, like from pulling back on the community outreach center, which they were doing in the Black and Latino communities?
Yeah, so here's the good news for Democratic war chest. The difference, I'm hoping, in strategy, if the Democrats want to edge the Republicans out in November, they have to not just invest in organizations like ours and other community-based organizations who are on the boots, who have built community trust with these communities, who can serve as amazing surrogates, if they had resources redirected to their mission and vision and impact. Now, the difference will be the timing. Now, both sides, the Reds and the Blues, have all given to these communities at some point in the campaign. Typically, the strategy is last-ditch effort. It's like, oh my God, the polls aren't doing right, so what can we do? All right, let's go to churches the week before. Let's, you know, and that's not really as authentic as you'd like. It's more transactionary than it is transformational, right? It's a transaction. It's not a meaningful, intentional relationship. So now the Democrats can actually take full advantage of having an overwhelming amount of cash on hand that they can redirect towards organizations who are already out there doing the work. And they can do that right now. They don't have to wait until October or the 2 weeks before, or to get Jay-Z or Beyonce to actually serve as surrogates, which doesn't work, by the way. I don't know if you've heard that. Right, it's that doesn't work. And so the best thing for both sides to do, whoever wants to win, is not just invest, but invest early.
Where should they invest?
Yeah, in terms of organizations, or
do you think where is the most cost-effective way for them to use this money? Is it going to be with TV ads, radio? Is it going to be in these outreach programs like you're talking about in, for example, places like Barber Shops or other locations where Black voters would congregate?
That's where you spend a majority of it. I mean, if we're breaking it up, I'd say 75% should go towards these organizations, these community-based organizations who have already built community trust within these communities. It should go there first. And then the other 25% should go towards marketing, right? Telling those stories. and putting the good work that you've done in front of people's faces, leveraging social media, leveraging, I don't know about TV ads too much anymore, but social media
why not
ads.
TV ads? Is it just
TV ads,
it's going the way of the dodo?
It really is. And here's the tough part. I think TV ads are impactful for people who watch TV. I don't know about you, Dylan, but I don't really watch much TV. Now, I don't think that's a majority of people. There's some older adults who are still in the habit of watching TV and nightly news, et cetera. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think most people get anecdotally, most people, and I probably can support this with true evidence, but I think most people get their news from the internet, but not necessarily through TV. So if you're trying to reach most people, you want to meet them where they are. And if you want to redirect resources, you want to spend it on where are they, which apps are they on, right? Which TV shows are they watching? Which sporting events are they attending? Right? That is much more impactful than broad brushing and just buying a whole bunch of ads and attack ads. That doesn't do much. Most people mute the TV or turn it or, don't even pay attention to it after a while.
Do you think that the DNC has that math that you do, like 75% community initiatives or the majority of the money going to on the ground community initiatives?
No, I don't. No, I don't. I think they better though. If they're interested in winning in November, they have to. Like this is and here's why they have to.
Can I ask you what's the math now? Would you say? I mean, obviously we don't have normal like specific numbers. I don't know.
Yeah.
But what is the math even close to where it should be? Is it far off?
It's not because if it was, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Like minority organizations who work with under-resourced, underserved, historically marginalized electorate, they don't necessarily get much funding. You got to really fight for the scraps. And so if there were some resources that were redirected, absolutely it would make a difference. But no, that's not what's happening. What typically happens though is that money is funneled down to the state party and then to the local party, and they're responsible for kind of figuring out what to do with it, which is not the right thing to do. So yeah, that strategy hasn't really worked. Not in an election so close, so critically close with such a flawed candidate in Trump, which I'm not ashamed to admit, but it shouldn't be this close. And so since it is this close, according to these polls, then you have to do things that you don't typically do in order to get things that you typically won't.
Do you think that, sorry, there's a little bit of reverb from your side, but do you think that, and I just put it bluntly because I'm trying to be just a blunt, honest conversation, Democrats are all taking the black vote for granted this election?
I think Democrats have taken the black vote for granted throughout history, right? But this election, they can't afford to, right? And again, you have a much more sophisticated electorate. It's no longer, hey, if you don't vote for me, you're not black, right? That doesn't work, right? It's more of okay, so what have you done for me lately? Like, what are you going to do, right? What promises are you going to make, and what promises are you going to keep, right? And so no, I don't.
Of the people that your organization and others are trying to mobilize and want to go see vote, what are the big ticket reasons that people say, I'm not voting, or I'm not interested, or it's not my business?
The biggest things is, it's interesting. I'm not hearing too much. We're not hearing, especially from our field organizers, we're not hearing too much of like, apathy. It's more of it's not necessarily apathy. Most folks aren't registered that we run into to begin with, right? And so that's what we're going after anyway, low propensity unregistered. So it's not necessarily apathy. They've never even participated. So it's not like they're missing out on something. So, but some of the reasons why they say that they're not voting is because they don't understand the candidates. The candidates aren't speaking to them. They don't see any change in their communities. Like, look, I voted 4 years ago and I'm still in the same situation. In fact, I'm in a worse situation. And so why should I continue to vote? So those are some of the things that you're hearing. You're hearing those things. You're also hearing, what are they going to do for me? Like, how am I going to get, what am I going to get out of the deal? Right. Which I think is a great thing. It's actually going to make us better. It's going to make politicians better. and how they view the Black male electorate and taking this more seriously.
How, and I want to bring this back to where we kind of started. How do you approach things like, how do you approach these people who usually wouldn't vote, usually wouldn't come out into this election, using that philosophy of start local? How does somebody who's, you know, focused on, I mean, if you're president of the United States, you could be thinking, oh, there's a strike on Israel, there's this war here, there's this war there, and you come and then you start talking about speed bumps. How do you make that transition? Is that the place for organizations like yours?
Yes, it is. And so you make that transition by truly helping them understand that this year, the next time we're going to go through this again is in 4 years. Right? So that's the next time we're going to go through. So that gap, within that gap, a lot of things are happening around you. You need to be aware. You need to be engaged. You need to be involved. And it's deeper than the president. The president's actions don't impact you as much as your attorney general or your council person or your, right? And so, or your mayor, like that, those actions impact you, your day-to-day life, right? And so that is what's most important. And so not one is more important than the other, but that is most important. How does it impact your day-to-day life? When you break it down that way, Dylan, that's very palatable, right? And it also introduces this new way of looking at your voter registration card. Most folks don't even see the benefit of voting. Well, why should I vote? I vote every 4 years, and the president, nothing's changed. Well, let me tell you why nothing's changed. You haven't participated in local elections. That's when you see the real change. That's when you see the difference there. That's when you, right? And so, and why would they even spend money?
The stuff that breaks my spirit is when I see those local election turnout rates. Oh my gosh, that will crush your soul.
It's insane. It's super low. Nobody cares, right? So nobody cares, right? But I would argue it's on both sides. It's not just the people. It's on the candidates as well. Candidates are lazy nowadays. Like, you get out there and you knock on doors. You meet people. You tell them why they should vote for you. It shouldn't just be because of the ads that you buy, or no, you get out there and shake hands, kiss babies. That works. That face-to-face human contact, that absolutely works. That's tried and true. And it's tried and tested, and it works. Most candidates are lazy. They're not going to do that. And so you know, then if you're not there convincing someone why they should go out and vote, then why should they go out and vote? Especially if the only time that they are introduced to voting is every 4 years, or the only time they think, or they hear the message that they should care about voting is every 4 years, and why should they vote any other time?
Gotcha. One last question, just because I thought of it, because you were talking about the need for the candidate to be out there. Is Joe Biden's stamina, it's a general issue, I think, being polled by the public, the idea of, is he too old to be there? Oh, he's in his 80s, Donald Trump's 77, oh, they're Donald Trump the young buck. But is that a big issue that you guys are receiving from people, that, like, number one, is he getting out there enough to reach voters? And number two, do they see that as a weakness of the president, for him not to be able to be president if he doesn't have that stamina?
Not necessarily, right? I mean, you got two old guys running, right? Two older adults running. So it's not, and they're 4 years apart. So, and that information is becoming more and more commonplace. And so the age and the stamina is not as important, especially when you look at the succession plan, right? And the team that he has around him. It's not just about Joe Biden. I mean, he has a whole cabinet. He has a whole vice president. He has a whole, I mean, come on, it's not just about Joe Biden. It's not, right? And you have some very capable human beings who are in that East and West wing who can do the work, and who are on their way there. So there's no doubt that Joe Biden has a stamina. I believe that he'd be wise enough not to run if he didn't think that he did, right? And we got to trust the guy's judgment. I mean, yeah, his whole 80-something year judgment, right? We got to trust it, right? And in this particular case, at least, and trust that he's making the best decision for him and his family. And if that includes running for president of the United States, then, you know, here we are. So we have to believe that he believes that he has the stamina. And if he does, we'll see what he does with it. So, but so far, pretty decent job with what he's done the past 3 years.
For sure, last question, then you can shout out as much stuff as you want. If you could give the Biden campaign or the DNC one piece of advice, you could scream this into their dreams, what would it be?
Invest in organizations like Black Men Vote now. Here's the difference between organizations like Black Men Vote and the strategy that the Democratic Party typically does. You know, it's cyclical and it's transaction. The organizations like ours, we build intentional interventions in communities. We're there year round. So it's not like we're just showing up and saying, hey, by the way, vote. No. So when we tell them to do something or be somewhere, they listen because we're there, right? When they look to the people, they recognize us. Folks, you have to start redirecting resources towards organizations like ours. That's the only way, literally, that the information will get passed through. Now, here's Exhibit A, Dylan. We have an issue with misinformation, right? And the problem with misinformation is not necessarily the misinformation itself, but it is the person who's sending the information, right? The source. And so the source is typically a trusted source. And the trusted source used to be ABC, CBS, right? Now the trusted source is my homeboy Dylan. I trust that he did the research. I don't have to look this up and, he's sending me something that I trust Dylan. He's my guy. Why would he send me something that he hasn't done research? And then I share it. And now somebody who trusts me, et cetera. So that's a huge problem, right? That source. Now, if you reverse it, it works the same way. If the Democratic Party wants to move this, you have to go through the trusted sources, right? You have to go through the people who actually can share that information, who they're going to trust, right? Because if I say to folks who follow me or et cetera, that Joe Biden, here's what Joe Biden's done, here's what the Democrat Party's done, et cetera, even though we're not a nonpartisan organization, they're going to trust my word because they trust me, right? But if they say it, they might not trust it because that level of connection is not there. They haven't built community trust with the folks. So yeah, the stamina is in question, but not really. I mean, I wish that these folks I wish it was two different candidates, to be honest with you. The sad part is I'm like, is this the best we can do as a country? Good grief, right? Not a good thing, especially while the rest of the world is getting younger. I mean, you see the leadership change around the world. They're embracing, younger folks taking over and new, fresher, innovative ideas and, not the same old.
Thank you so much for coming on today. Would you like to shout out any organizations you work with if you wanted anybody to go check out any work or, help your organization out?
Why not? Well, there's the first one is blackmenvote.org. We're all over the country. We're primarily focused in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan right now, and DC, the greater Washington area. Special shout out to Optima Nova AI, Strategies and Solutions. You can follow me on social media at Joe Paul Speaks. I'm on X, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on all that. You'll know it's me because I'm the only Joe Paul who looks like this. So, but Dylan, thanks so much for inviting me and allowing me to share a little bit in your space.
Hey, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. The best $0 I've ever spent on Zoom.
I hear that. Look, invite me back. Would love to continue the conversation, especially as we get closer to the
100%. I will invite you back. That's a promise, okay?
Count me in.
Awesome. You have a good one. Bye-bye.
All right, friend. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.